Hi, very good morning. I'm Dr. Janak Patel, MD, General Physician. All my video lectures are for only educative purpose. They are mainly for fourth year students, interns, and the person who will be going for their private practice. Today I am going to discuss regarding one of the very useful topic in vital signs, that is examination of pulse. I will divide it into two parts. So today I am going to take first part, that is introduction, rate, and rhythm. So these three parts will be discussing in this particular chapter, and rest of the thing will be discussing in a second part, that will be next time. This is one of the most important vital sign which any person can examine very easily, and if you examine pulse properly you can pick up lot of conditions. You can identify good number of conditions. So if examination of pulse is done very nicely, it is a good vital sign for diagnosis of good number of different diseases. So we'll be talking regarding a pulse. We'll be discussing under heading definition, little introduction regarding physiology, and then we'll be going to what we call as pulse examination. So what exactly is a pulse? Pulse is a periodic thrust which is felt over artery by a palpating finger due to contraction, that is contraction of ventricle, that is we call ventricular systole, and due to ventricular systole it results into blood flow in an artery, and that produces expansion of the artery due to pressure by a blood column when it passes through the artery, and this what you feel a thrust is called as a pulse. So it is also defined as a wave of blood created by contraction of left ventricle during ventricular systole. Hence, this will depend upon cardiac output. So if cardiac output is very small, pulse may not be felt. And if cardiac output is more, the pulse volume will be more. You will be able to feel the peripheral pulse, which are very close to skin, and there has to be a heart structure behind that particular artery. Then you will be able to feel that particular pulse. And if you feel the movement or impulse over the chest at the apical region, it is called apical pulse. Or we also use another word we call central pulse, and it is located at the apex of the heart. So good number of time we also call as cardiac pulse or apical pulse. Now we know very well physiology wise, whenever there is a systole, there will be ejection of blood by left ventricle into aorta, and then blood will flow forward, and when the blood column is flowing through an artery, it expands the artery. It creates the pressure on the arterial wall, which produces expansion of the arterial wall, and that what we feel by a palpating finger, we call that as pulse. So when you want to examine the pulse, the person should be lying quietly in a bed. By and large, we always feel for the carotid pulse, which is very easily palpable. One of the peripheral pulse. So it is felt on the medial side of the sternomastoid, just above the cricoid cartilage. And if you want to record, then you can use the recorder, which should be placed, we call transducer, should be placed over carotid artery just above the cricoid cartilage medial to sternomastoid, and you can get a recording of carotid arterial pulse. This particular recording is called sphygmogram. So it is a mirror image of a heart, that is indirectly it gives you the different phases of a cardiac cycle, and that can be recorded, and that we call as sphygmogram. There will be a positive wave, we call as an anacrotic wave. It indicates ventricular systole, and the downstroke, what we see, is called catacrotic wave, which indicates ventricular diastole. During that downstroke, you see a small notch, we call it a dicrotic notch, and this notch corresponds to closure of aortic semilunar valve. Now you can see here the ventricle starts contracting, so this is the ventricular systole. This is called anacrotic limb. Then when the systole gets over, now ventricular diastole begins. There is a downstroke. This is called catacrotic limb. And at this stage, you get a closure of aortic valve. That produces what we call as a dicrotic notch. And then the second part of that downstroke is called as a dicrotic wave. So this portion is called catacrotic. This is called dicrotic wave. Up to this is systolic period, and after this there is a diastolic period. So this is the closure of semilunar valve, and that particular aortic valve, when it closes, it produces a small notch, we call it a dicrotic notch. And from S to C is systole, and from C to this particular downstroke where it completes, this will correspond to the first heart sound. This will correspond to the second heart sound. So from first heart sound till second heart sound is systole, and from second heart sound till first heart sound is a diastole. Diastole is always longer than systole. So this is what we get on recording in a arterial pulse, and the best recording you can get over the carotid artery. So these are the description what are being, I have already explained you. That is anacrotic limb, dicrotic notch, dicrotic wave, dicrotic limb. Now while examining a pulse, there are different techniques. We call 3-finger techniques, 2-finger technique, single finger technique. Best is 3-finger technique. We use 3 finger, that is index finger, middle finger and ring finger. Now these 3 finger are kept proximal to the heart. So index finger will be pointing towards the proximal to the heart. Ring finger will be distal from the heart whenever you are feeling for the pulse. So proximal finger will check the force of the pulse. Distal finger will obliterate the backflow, and middle finger will palpate the pulse. This is the best way of examining a pulse. So if I show you that particular diagram here, so while assessing a pulse, 3 fingers are utilized. Stethoscope is used for assessing the apical pulse and fetal heart sounds. Doppler can be utilized to confirm those different sounds, but by and large we don't use a Doppler. While examining a pulse, best is a finger. So while you are examining a pulse, this is a 3-finger method. You can see this is one way of palpating. So this is the index finger, which is distal most, while ring finger is proximal. So when you are using this, this becomes obliterating, this is regulating, and this is palpating finger. So with this you obliterate the backflow, with this you regulate the blood flow, and with this you palpate. And when you put this way, you can see again, this is the index finger which is distal, this is ring finger which is proximal. So always use three finger method. Now depending upon which side you are palpating, if you are using a right hand in a right hand of a patient, then your index finger will be pointing towards proximal and ring finger will be distal. If you are using a right hand to palpate the right radial pulse, if I got a figure, I'll show you. This is again the same thing. This is same, this is similar. This is an index finger pointing occluding finger. So this is an occluding finger, this is a palpating finger, this is a regulating finger. But suppose if I am using a right hand in a right person. So yes, here you can see that index finger is distal most and ring finger is proximal. Yes, by and large, when you use this particular technology, you are going to use the three finger. So the finger which is distal most will be occluding finger, the proximal finger will be regulating finger, and middle finger will be palpating finger. So with this, you adjust the blood flow so that you palpate the best volume, and with this you occlude the distal part of an artery so that you can feel maximum by middle finger. This is called three finger method. This is two finger method. So this becomes occluding, this becomes palpating plus regulating. So this is also one of the technique, but by and large always try to use three finger method. This is single finger method, this becomes occluding, regulating and palpating finger. Here this will be occluding finger, this will be palpating finger, and this will be regulating finger. So proximal finger is always regulating, middle finger is palpating, and distal most finger, whether it is an index finger or a ring finger, how you are palpating, it will depend upon that. And that will be occluding finger. Before you palpate the pulse, ideally you should wash your hands, wear gloves, provide privacy, make the patient comfortable and in relaxed position, always examine in a supine posture where the person will be best relaxed. Place the fingertips, first two or middle three finger over the brachial pulse or over the radial pulse. With distal most finger you occlude, with proximal finger you try to regulate the blood flow, and with middle finger you try to palpate. Do not use thumb. Place the finger over the radial pulse in an adult. In a children, usually brachial pulse is utilized. A pressure should be very light, and once you start feeling a pulse very nicely, now you can calculate rate. We look for many things, not only rate and rhythm. You calculate rate, and rate should be calculated for 60 seconds. Don't try to calculate for 30 seconds and multiply by 2. It will be little inaccurate technique. So by and large always calculate for 60 seconds. And during that particular you look whether the interval between the two pulse is regular or irregular. And if it is irregular, then whether it is regularly irregular or irregularly irregular. Try to look for that. That tells you the rhythm. Then you can look for volume, tension and force. You compare right radial with left radial, compare the volume and look for radio-radial delay. Compare the upper limb with lower limb pulse, compare volume, force and also look for radiofemoral delay. This will be very useful in good number of conditions. And when you compare radial pulse with apical impulse, you can look for what we call as apex pulse deficit. So you look for that apex pulse deficit. Then look for character of the pulse. There are different types of pulse which are being described. We'll be discussing in a second part. So look for those different character if you can identify, like anacrotic pulse, dicrotic pulse, pulsus bisferians, pulsus alternans, pulsus paradoxus, then Waterhammer pulse, etc. Forceful pulse, all those different types of pulse. Then you can also look for what we call as Addison sign. You can look for capillary refilling time. You can also look for the pulse volume and grade them. You can look for arterial wall. All these are included in examination of pulse. After finishing the pulse examination, now you will have to put it into a record. So mention all those findings, what you have looked for, whether what is the rate, what is the rhythm, whether there is an apical pulse deficit, whether you have compared right with left radial, radial with femoral, then arterial wall. All those findings you should mention in a paper and it should be recorded. And after finishing the examination of pulse, remove the gloves, wash your hands, and you can transfer the documents, what you have mentioned, to your senior, to the doctor in charge. Now we'll be talking on some of the part. At present we'll be talking on three, that is rate, rhythm and character of the pulse in this particular chapter. Next lecture we'll be talking on all these other, that is volume, tension, force. You palpate all peripheral pulse, compare right with left side, upper limb with lower limb, look for vessel wall, apex pulse deficit, look for Bruit, grading of palpable pulse. If you can examine abdominal aorta, fundus and ECG monitoring, look for Allen test, Addison test and capillary refilling time. All this will be taking in part 2. At present we'll be talking on pulse rate, rhythm and character. So I'll start with a rate. Best way of palpating the pulse is by 3-finger method. Person should be in a supine posture. Apply a gentle pressure. Don't apply a force while palpating the pulse. A gentle pressure should be applied. Distal finger will occlude the pulse. Proximal finger will regulate the blood flow. And middle finger should palpate the pulse very clearly. So you have to use the 2 finger, that is proximal and middle finger, to find out the best pulse. Once you feel the pulse very clearly, now you calculate for full 60 seconds, and that will be the rate. And when you are palpating that, also you look for regularity. We'll be discussing in second part of this. So first, regarding a rate. In any normal person, particularly we are talking of adult, the rate will be between 60 to 100, we call as normal. Lower limit is 60, upper limit is 100. More than 100 is called tachycardia, less than 60 is called bradycardia. But in infants, the rate can be between 120 to 150. This is normal. While in a children, it can be right from 70 to 120. This you will have to keep it in mind when you are examining the children's or newborn infants. But what we'll be talking about at present is mainly in an adult, grown-up children's or adult. Now this pulse can be affected by some of the physiological factors as already we have mentioned regarding age. So in a newborn, pulse rate average is around 30. At the 1 year it is around 120. Between 5 to 8 years it is around 100. And 10 years it will come closer to normal, that is 70. And in adult average is around 80. And if you look at the range, in adult it is between 60 to 100, while in children it is 80 to 140 or 75 to 120 when the child is between 5 to 8 years age. So with age it changes. Older the individual, the pulse rate range becomes same 60 to 100, but there will be little decrease in the average, that is around 70. In female, usually the rate is little less as compared to male. In supine posture, the rate will be standard, but it will change with erect posture. With erect posture, initially there will be little increase in the heart rate, so there will be increase in the pulse rate, and then it will settle down because you will have a what we call as compensatory mechanism. When the person stands, venous return is less, cardiac output is less, there will be fall in blood pressure. To compensate that, there will be little tachycardia, there will be increase in the heart rate, and this will compensate within few seconds to minute, and then your rate will remain standard. There are some drugs which can increase your heart rate. Certain illness can increase or decrease your heart rate. Same way drugs can increase or decrease the heart rate. So this you will have to keep it in mind. Because in case of say enteric fever, you will have a relative bradycardia. So in some cases you can have a relative bradycardia. Emotions, particularly anxiety, will always increase your heart rate. A physical activity will also increase your heart rate. Increase in your body temperature is going to increase your heart rate. Physical training will also increase your heart rate. Exercise, exposure to heat will also increase your heart rate. A pain will also increase your heart rate because it will produce anxiety. So all this condition is going to increase your heart rate. You must keep those physiological factors in your mind when you are mentioning regarding tachycardia. Those will come back as soon as the factors which is increasing the rate is withdrawn. Now we'll be talking about some of the conditions which produces tachycardia. We usually use the word sinus tachycardia or sinus bradycardia. So when you are palpating, you should not use the word sinus because that word will be only on ECG record. But when you palpate, you cannot say it is sinus or it is atrial or it is nodal or it is ventricular. Hence, ideal word is only tachycardia. If the rate is more than 100, we call tachycardia, which can be because of exercise, pain, anxiety, excitement, elevation of temperature, thyrotoxicosis, certain medications, particularly vasodilator drugs, sympathomimetic drugs. These are few of the examples. They will ask you very frequently in your oral. But if a person develops arrhythmias, then we call that tachycardia is secondary due to arrhythmias, where the rate will be very fast, like atrial fibrillation, atrial flutter, supraventricular tachycardia, ventricular tachycardia. But this terminology you can utilize only after ECG record and ECG reading, because then only you can say whether it is fibrillation or flutter, whether it is supraventricular tachycardia or ventricular tachycardia. That you can mention only after looking at ECG. But when you are examining the pulse, you can say only tachycardia or not. And you can mention regarding the rhythm, whether it is regular or irregular. If it is irregular, it will be more in favor of atrial flutter fibrillation. If it is absolutely irregularly irregular, it will be more in favor of atrial fibrillation. Now, when the pulse rate is less than 60, we call as a bradycardia, which can be during deep sleep, in athletes, hypothyroidism, and certain drugs we call ABCD. A for amiodarone, B for beta blocker, C for calcium channel blocker, that is verapamil and diltiazem, and D for digoxin. Here we have forgotten to mention A for amiodarone. So in those conditions, by and large you will have a bradycardia. And other condition which can also produce bradycardia like sick sinus syndrome, second degree AV block, complete heart block, and carotid sinus hypersensitivity. But again, all these conditions you can identify after having a ECG record or ECG tracing. There is one word we call it the relative tachycardia and relative bradycardia. That is, with 1 degree rise of temperature, you will have a usually increase in the pulse rate by approximately, we say that 4 to 10. In children it is more, in adult it is less. So if there is an elevation of body temperature by say around 4 degrees Fahrenheit, then your pulse rate will increase by almost, we say that 15 to 20. So if there is not much rise in a temperature and still there is a tachycardia, it will be very common in rheumatic carditis, diphtheritic myocarditis, tuberculosis, etc. While you will have a relative bradycardia, classical in case of an enteric fever. You may see also in case of a viral fever like dengue or yellow fever. And whenever you get a relative bradycardia, it is given a name Faggot sign. This can be asked to you in your oral. If someone knows, you should be able to answer. Also, you can get in case of cerebral abscess, and you can have a relative bradycardia also in case of a brucellosis. So these are the two common conditions you should keep it in mind: enteric fever, brucellosis, and sometime in case of a cerebral abscess or pyogenic meningitis secondary due to severely raised intracranial pressure. But also you can get in case of a dengue fever also, and that is given a name. Relative bradycardia is given a name, Faggot sign. So do keep it in mind. So this is in detail regarding a tachycardia which can be asked to you in your oral. Always mention tachycardia, don't mention when you examine a pulse that sinus or arrhythmia. If the rhythm is irregular, you can mention there is arrhythmias. But by and large, always use the word only tachycardia, don't mention sinus tachycardia, and don't try to mention any of this terminology. This is only after you get an ECG record. So always be careful, don't try to mention on clinical side. If someone asks you what is a pulse, what do you think, don't use the word sinus tachycardia, sinus bradycardia. Always use the word tachycardia, bradycardia. Sinus word is utilized if in an ECG all QRS complex are narrow, all QRS complex are preceded by P wave, and both are in same direction, then only you can call that as sinus rhythm. So do keep it in mind. Now we go to what we call as a rhythm. So while you are examining a pulse, always look at the interval between the two pulse. All interval between the two pulse should be regular. And if it is regular, we call as that as a regular rhythm. Remember, good number of condition may be regular rhythm, but on an ECG, it can be complete heart block, it can be 2:1 block, which will not be a sinus rhythm, but maybe some arrhythmias. So always remember, on peripheral pulse examination, if interval between the two pulse is constant, maybe sinus or maybe because of arrhythmia also. So we'll be just little going through that particular part. So if the interval between the two is absolutely normal, then we call it a regular rhythm, which can be normal. And if the rate is fast, more than 100, we call it tachycardia with regular rhythm. And if the rate is less than 60, we'll call bradycardia with regular rhythm. Now, if the interval is not regular, then whether it is regularly irregular or irregularly irregular. By and large, majority of the time, if it is irregularly irregular interval between the each pulse, most common cause is atrial fibrillation. Majority of the time, you will be right. So always look for that irregular interval between the two pulse. And rate wise, if it is more than 100, we call atrial fibrillation with fast ventricular rate. We don't use the word tachycardia. And if the rate is less, then we call it atrial fibrillation with slow ventricular rate. Now, if it is at a regular interval, say every third beat is missing, very frequently it is in a case of a ventricular bigeminy or ventricular trigeminy or tetrageminy. In a bigeminy, alternate beat are missing. In trigeminy, after two pulse, the third pulse is missing. In quadrigeminy, every fourth pulse is missing. Penta, fifth, sexa, hexa, sixth, that way. So regularly regular, very classical in case of an ectopic beat, particularly ventricular ectopic beat. Also you can come across in case of a second degree heart block, particularly in case of a 2:1 block. Very particularly you will have a regular pulse, while in case of a Mobis type 1, we call Van Quebec phenomena, it will be regularly irregular. And in sinus arrhythmia, the interval will change with inspiration and expiration. So if you feel the interval is changing with inspiration and expiration, you can label that as sinus arrhythmias. And if it is irregularly irregular, first possibility is atrial fibrillation. Second, if it is a multiple extrasystoles which are irregular, then it can be irregularly irregular. And if there is an atrial fibrillation with varying block, say maybe atrial fibrillation with 2:1 block, then 3:1 block, or 1:1 block, then it will be irregularly irregular. Now, if you get a pulse deficit, difference between heart rate and pulse rate, then it is classical in case of atrial fibrillation. We'll be talking regarding apex pulse deficit and pulse deficit in a subsequent part. So this should be kept in mind. So repeating again, regularly irregular, sinus arrhythmia, second degree AV block, particularly in case of a Mobis type 1, or we call it a Van Quebec phenomena. Occasionally you can get in a atrial tachyarrhythmia, particularly say multifocal atrial tachycardia and atrial flutter, which can be regularly irregular. And if there is a fixed AV block, say like fixed AV block, 2:1 block or 3:1 block, then it can be regularly irregular. But by and large, in that fixed block, it is nearly regular interval between the two RR. In case of a ventricular bigeminy, trigeminy, tetrageminy, penta, hexa, septa, deca, in all those, octa, nano, these are all regularly irregular. And we already mentioned irregularly irregular atrial fibrillation, multiple atrial or ventricular ectopic beats. Atrial flutter with variable blocks, etc. can have irregular. So this already we have mentioned. We can skip over this particular part. Now we come to the character. Ideally, it is quite difficult to identify the character. Character you will be able to pick up if you get plethysmograph, that is a recording of an arterial pulse or tracing of an arterial pulse, particularly carotid pulse. Then you will be able to mention whether it is a anacrotic pulse or a dicrotic pulse, etc. But clinically, if you pay a genuine attention, then only you will be able to identify. It is extremely difficult, but still it is very frequently asked to you in your oral. So I'm mentioning some of the terminology which can be asked to you in your oral. There is one term called as a anacrotic pulse. Normal pulse is a dicrotic pulse. To identify the dicrotic notch on a pulse examination, it is extremely difficult. An expert can pick up. Even I am not able to pick up good number of time. It is very difficult. I am not able to make out whether there is a dicrotic notch or not. So dicrotic notch, if you feel on a descending limb, you will say that this is dicrotic pulse. If you see a low volume pulse and there is no notch, there is no dicrotic notch, then we call that as a pulsus parvus or anacrotic pulse, which is a characteristic of aortic stenosis. You have to remember that there is something called as anacrotic pulse. Same is called pulsus parvus, and you will get in a tight aortic stenosis. While in case of aortic regurgitation, that is we call as a water hammer pulse, or second name is collapsing pulse, or you can get Corrigan pulse. Now this pulse is not to be palpated at radial, but you have to put a palm over the forearm here, this part, and you have to elevate the arm above the head, or we call above the neck. So you elevate the arm. When you elevate the arm, what happens during systole? Blood flows up, and during diastole all the blood will regurgitate back through the aorta into LV, and that will produce sudden collapse of a pulse, and this will be felt very nicely over the forearm. So if you feel a very good pulse over the forearm by keeping a palm over the forearm and elevating the arm above the head, that is described as a water hammer pulse or collapsing pulse or Corrigan pulse. There are many other names in aortic regurgitation, in peripheral pulse. We'll be mentioning all those names in a chapter when we do an aortic regurgitation. There is another variety of a pulse we call as a pulsus paradoxus, which is characteristic in case of a cardiac tamponade. Now this is a very characteristic pulse. You feel for the radial pulse. Already radial pulse is of a low volume. In a normal person, when the person takes a deep breath, in a normal person, during deep inspiration, the venous return to the right side of the heart is reduced. And as the venous return is reduced, the cardiac output reduces, the pulse volume reduces. When this phenomena is exaggerated in a person with cardiac tamponade, or we call pericardial tamponade, or in a person with a massive pericardial effusion, we'll be mentioning little bit regarding a pulsus paradoxus in a separate chapter. This phenomena becomes so much exaggerated that when a person takes a deep inspiration and holds it, the pulse volume reduces to such an extent that pulse disappears. Now when person takes a forceful expiration, lung is squeezed, all the blood returns to left atrium. As the left atrium gets a good return, left ventricle volume increases, cardiac output increases, pulse volume increases, and pulse volume starts increasing. This is typically described as pulsus paradoxus, which you can feel over the radial pulse, and ask the person to take a very deep inspiration, hold it, and see that volume is reducing and sometimes pulse disappears. And when the person takes forceful expiration, the pulse volume reappears. It increases slowly. This is characteristic of pulsus paradoxus, and it is seen in a cardiac tamponade, or we call as a pericardial tamponade, in massive pericardial effusion. Usually we don't come across in constrictive pericarditis. Sometimes you can even see this in case of a severe cor pulmonale. These are some of the conditions where you can demonstrate pulsus paradoxus. And pulsus paradoxus can be also demonstrable by taking a blood pressure. At this stage I'll mention because it can be asked in oral. When you take a blood pressure and person is taking a deep inspiration, there will be a fall of blood pressure by more than 20 millimeter of mercury. And if it falls more than 20 millimeter of mercury in a systolic blood pressure, we'll label that as pulsus paradoxus. Now there is another variety of a pulse we call as a pulsus bispherians. This will be very characteristic, where you will be able to feel the pulse with a two head. You will see two uplift while palpating the pulse. It will be seen in a person who has got a severe aortic regurgitation, or person who has got a predominant aortic regurgitation with aortic stenosis, and sometime in case of a hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. In short, we call it as a HOCM, hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. This is called pulsus bispherians. We'll show you that arterial tracing. There is another variety of a pulse where one pulse is of a good volume, one pulse is of a little less volume. Alternating pulse is of a good volume, low volume, good volume, low volume. Then we call that as a pulsus alterans. Same thing which you can see in a ECG. One QRS complex is of a good voltage and second QRS complex is of a low voltage. We call electrical alternance. And that is very characteristic in a case of a severe congestive heart failure and in case of a pericardial tamponade. Also you can see in a person with massive pericardial effusion. And there is a third variety of a pulse we call as a pulsus bigeminus, where you get one pulse of a good volume and immediately followed by a second pulse which will be of a different volume. This is pulsus bigeminus. And normal pulse is described as dicrotic pulse, or it is also called as a catacrotic pulse. These are the different terms which are being utilized. You should be aware of all this terminology. They can be asked to you in your oral. You should be aware of all these terms. Now we'll be showing you one by one. This is an ECG record. During QRS complex, you get an uplift. In a normal person, you get an uplift, and on the downstroke, you get a dicrotic notch. So you get a dicrotic notch on a downstroke. If you get a upslope, which is slow rising, then it is also called a slow rising pulse, or it is called as an anacrotic pulse, or it is also called as a pulsus parvus. If you get a very good volume and sharp fall, so sharp rise, sharp fall, classical in case of a water hammer pulse, which you can see in aortic regurgitation. And if you see two peak on the upslope, at the peak, two heads, then it is called bispherians, characteristic in case of a severe aortic regurgitation or AR with AS. Alternate pulse is of a different volume, pulsus alterans, and slowly the pulse disappears to such an extent that the pulse volume is almost markedly diminished. Classical in case of a cardiac tamponade. These are the most common which you will come across in your everyday practice. So pulses alterans classical, and on an ECG tracing if you get, we use the word electrical alterans. Alternate is strong and weak pulse. Very characteristic in a case of a severe congestive heart failure and in a case of a cardiac tamponade. And the difference in the two will be more than 20 millimeter of mercury. Here this will be higher, here the blood pressure will fall little bit. So difference between the two may be as much as 20 millimeter of mercury. Classical pulses alterans is in a case of a severe left ventricular failure, or we call severe congestive heart failure, and cardiac tamponade. These are other causes. Don't try to mention this in your oral exam. Don't try to mention typhoid fever or dehydration or dilated cardiomyopathy. Yes, HOCM. HOCM, hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, can produce pulsus bispherians. Not pulsus alterans. Anacrotic pulse is also called pulsus parvus, and sometimes it is called pulsus parvus et tardus, and classical in case of aortic stenosis. Very characteristic in a case of an aortic stenosis. Remember only one example, classical in case of a severe aortic stenosis. If they ask you anything more, then you can use the word small volume pulse, low cardiac output, coarctation of aorta, those particular conditions. Bispherians, we have already used this word. Bispherians or bispherious pulse or biphasic pulse or pulsus dichroticus or double beating pulse. Bis means twice, Ferrari means to beat, and this is very characteristic in a case of severe aortic regurgitation or in a case of a hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, or if there is an aortic regurgitation predominant with aortic stenosis. Typical. Two heads, very characteristic. While bigeminous means, this is very characteristic that there is a one normal QRS complex followed by a premature contraction, and this is very characteristic seen in a digitalis toxicity. This is not common, this is rather rare. 2 beats and a pause thereafter recurs repeatedly in a regular fashion. This is very characteristic seen in a digitalis toxicity. We call 3:1 block, 3:2 block, sorry, 3:2 block. So forget about this. Very rarely it can be asked to you. There is something called as a hypokinetic pulse or a low volume pulse. Very characteristic in a case of acute left ventricular failure, hypovolumic shock, tight aortic stenosis, tight mitral stenosis, this will be the common. Also cardiac output will be markedly reduced in case of a cardiac tamponade, dilated cardiomyopathy, massive pulmonary embolism. Also you can have a low volume pulse or hypokinetic pulse. These are all the different names utilized in water hammer pulse. I am not going in detail at present. There are certain names: Quincke sign, Corrigan signs, Bispherians, Alfred de Musset sign, Muller sign, dancing carotid or Corrigan pulse, etc. There are a lot of different names given to this. I am not using any one of these at present. In a chapter of aortic regurgitation, we will be using all this terminology. Yes, they are the questions for oral exams. That's the reason why I put this particular slide. But we'll be using all this terminology and we'll be explaining you in a chapter of aortic regurgitation. These are all those different signs: Austin Flint murmur, Corrigan pulse, de Rousset sign, Hill sign, Main sign, Trop sign, Quincke's pulse, Muller signs, Alfred de Musset signs, etc. So these are all, there are many names. I'm skipping over all this. This is what we call as, when you come across classical pulsus paradoxus. So mechanism, I've already explained you what happens during deep inspiration. That during deep inspiration, the venous return to the right side is reduced, which will be markedly reduced if the person has got cardiac tamponade, massive pericardial effusion, restrictive cardiomyopathy, acute MI, cardiogenic shock, status asthmaticus, severe cor pulmonale. In all these conditions, there will be severe decrease in the venous return to the right side of the heart, and if the right side of the heart return is less volume will go to left ventricle, cardiac output will reduce, pulse volume will reduce. Very characteristic. And this is how you will see. This is how you will get. Better explanation is here. So during a deep inspiration, there is decreased venous return to the right side of the heart. And because there is a decreased return to the right side of the heart, but comparatively, right ventricle gets an adequate blood, more than a LV. So the interventricular septum is shifted towards the left side, reducing the LV capacity, and also the venous return is less. Hence the blood going to the lung is less, and as the blood going to lung is less blood comes to the LV, cardiac output is decreased, and because lung has expanded during inspiration, blood is sucked more into lungs. During expiration, the lung is compressed. Blood will be ejected from lungs into LA and then into LV. So LV output will increase. Interventricular septum will now compress towards the right ventricle. This will be characteristics which will be seen in any person who has got cardiac tamponade, constrictive pericarditis, massive pericardial effusion. This will be characteristic, and that will produce slowly the pulse will come up during forceful expiration and pulse will disappear during forceful inspiration. So do keep this thing in mind. These are all the causes of pulsus paradoxus. Cardiac causes, these are cardiac causes. These are extra cardiac causes we call pulmonary causes, that is tension pneumothorax and status asthmaticus. And non-cardiac, non-pulmonary causes like extreme obesity, superior vena cava obstruction, you should keep it in mind. But by and large, it is most common in cardiac tamponade, massive pericardial effusion, constrictive pericarditis, massive pulmonary embolism, severe cardiogenic shock, restrictive cardiomyopathy, and acute MI. But these three comes in topmost on the list. And then if they ask you in oral, you can mention these other causes. In theory, you can mention all these causes. Depending upon how they ask you in oral, you should mention those causes. Now this is another thing which can be asked to you in your oral, that if the person is having cardiac tamponade, but there is no pulsus paradoxus, because there is a cardiac tamponade with atrial septal defect, or there is a severe aortic stenosis, aortic regurgitation, left ventricular dysfunction, etc. It will be without pulsus paradoxus. And person is having pulsus paradoxus, but there is no cardiac tamponade, means there is no cardiac disease like COPD, massive pulmonary embolism, restrictive cardiomyopathy, extreme obesity, tense ascites. In ideally we don't say tamponade, but we say RV infarct. And if the person is having effusive constrictive pericarditis, but classical in case of a status asthmaticus, severe COPD, or we call severe cor pulmonale, then you can use the word extreme obesity, tense ascites, then you can think in terms of a restrictive cardiomyopathy, etc. These are for your oral exams. This is what we have shown you: pulsus alterans, good volume, low volume, good volume, low volume. This is pulsus paradoxus. Slowly the pulse increases in size, volume increases, volume decreases. So during inspiration, volume decreases. During expiration, volume increases. Reverse pulsus paradoxus will be a odd sign. In an inspiration, there is a rise in arterial pulse, which will be seen classically in case of a hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. So you might get, so one example you may remember, you can have a reverse pulsus paradoxus in case of a hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. A person who is on a positive pressure ventilation, particularly of intermittent variety, or if a person has got atrioventricular dissociation in this also. But remember hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, and if you can remember intermittent positive pressure ventilation and AV dissociation. Next time we'll be discussing in part 2 volume, tension, force, all peripheral pulse, right and left side radial pulse comparison, upper limb and lower limb comparison, vessel wall examination, apex pulse deficit, apex pulse rate comparison, Bruit, grading, ECG monitoring, ideally can be asked in your oral, fundus examination, abdominal aorta, Allen test, Edson test, and capillary refilling time. So I end my lecture here. I hope this will be very helpful to you. Very commonly asked to you in your oral exams. Very frequently they'll ask you, examine the pulse and tell me your finding. Don't just wait at rate and rhythm. Do look for character, mention even if you don't know, say it is a normal character. Mention all these findings. That is complete examination of pulse. So very commonly asked in your oral exam. Good number of time there are some short notes which can be like pulsus paradoxus, water hammer pulse, etc. can be asked in your theory. Very important, if you can pick up these things in your everyday practice, it will be helpful. You can pick up some of the odd conditions where person may not have a classical symptoms and signs. So I feel this lecture will be very helpful to you. If you like this lecture, press button like, subscribe, press bell icon. You can share with your friends to whom you feel it may be helpful. I thank you all for taking out time. I know that your time is valuable and I appreciate you for spending some of the time with me. So I end my lecture here. We'll be seeing you in a part 2 pulse examination.